Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I anticipate that we'll get a few more people trickling in. I know that I am not always at the top of my game and being completely on time for Zoom meetings. There's always a few technical difficulties, especially when you're trying to get into a Zoom room. But we're going to start out with just some ground rules, a brief introduction. I don't think that this will be anything that's too important for people if they can in late. We're also recording this workshop, so you'll be able to view it on YouTube with the rest of the Assembly 2022 presentations and workshops that have been going on this week. Let me just first start out by thanking you all again for being here. My name is Casey Gardonio-Fote. I'm currently serving my third year as the Secretary of the AEU Board of Directors, and I'm a member of the St. Louis Society. I'm also a member of the Communications Committee, which is chaired by our wonderful new staff member, Communications and Program Support Coordinator, Jake Ritter. So he is here too. He's joining us as a panelist. I'll be moderating this panel on communications best practices, and I'm going to introduce you to our three other panelists in just a moment. But first, I want to just give you a couple of ground rules. I know that we're all very, very familiar with Zoom these days, but just to let you know how this 90-minute workshop is going to run, we're going to facilitate this like a panel discussion. So I'll be prompting our panelists for some of their insights on some marketing and communications best practices with a specific eye to what you can do as ethical society members on a grassroots level, maybe not a professional level, but rather kind of an amateur communications person level, to help promote your society, but get professional looking results. And we are going to hopefully have some time for questions at the end of this workshop, but I'm going to ask that everybody hold their questions until the end so that we can not have a lot of breaks, or really so that we can keep our panel discussion on track and cover the things that our panelists have discussed are most important for them to be able to mention. And then if we have questions that take us a little bit further afield at the end of the session, we'll be able to cover those without disrupting anything too much. If you'd like to ask a question at the end, or if you come up with something in the middle of the session and you don't have a chance to write it down, just feel free to put it into the chat. We'll all be monitoring the chat, and I'll make sure to read through those questions as well for our panelists at the end of the session so that you won't get missed. But if you do want to wait and want to ask your question out loud, please do so by using the Zoom raise hand feature. And for those of you who are not certain how to access this, which at this point in 2022, I'm not sure that anybody doesn't know how to raise their hand on Zoom at this point. It can be a little bit different depending on what system you're using, but usually you'll be able to find that if you hover your mouse over your screen. There'll be some icons that pop up along the lower edge of that screen, and you'll be able to click on the button that says reactions. It looks like a little smiley face. When you click on that, there will be several kind of emojis at the top, but then at the bottom, there'll be a button that says raise hand. So it looks like Bill Lewis has figured it out already because I see your hand raised. So if you just click on that, we'll get a notification that your hand is raised, and we'll go through and call on you and then lower your hand after you've had a chance to ask your question. So without further ado, I'd like to first introduce our panelists. I mentioned a little bit about myself. I'm from the Ethical Society of St. Louis. I've been serving as the secretary of the board for the last 3 years, so since 2019. And I have also done work in entrepreneurship, and I managed all of the marketing and social media and branding and other publicity efforts for both of those businesses. So that's kind of where my background comes in here. I'm largely self-taught, and so I do think that I bring a useful perspective to this conversation, because if I could teach myself all of these things, then I have no doubt that all of you will be able to teach yourself these too without having to enroll in a marketing program at your local university. But let me go on to the rest of our panelists, because they are a little bit more professionally trained than I am. And I'm going to start with our program support and communications coordinator, Jake Ritter.
Oh, I unmute myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Ritter. As Casey put it, I am the program support and communications coordinator at the AEU. Large part of my role, I would say, breaks down into two key categories. It's micro and macro. So Micro, I play a large role in assisting societies in their social media efforts, promotion, working to help use the reach of the AEU to bring attention to other societies, including writing in the newsletter about key events going on, things that they've already done in their respective communities. In addition to this, I also work on just boosting the presence of the AEU overall. I think one thing that many people can agree is once you find like-minded people, a lot of people would say, I agree with ethical culture, I just didn't know what it was before. So as I was, and as my wife was as well. So I'm hoping to help continue to use that megaphone, help people know more about the AU, ethical culture, and using various social media platforms, emails to show the great work that everyone is doing. And I think that's enough for me for now.
Okay, thanks so much, Jake. Next, I'd like to have Tati Senya. I'm sorry, I just practiced pronouncing your name, Tati, and then I just mispronounced it.
It's
Tati
totally
Senya,
fine.
who is from the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture.
Hi, everybody. I'm with the Brooklyn Society. I've been with the Brooklyn Society for, I think, probably about 7 years. I've worked in marketing and web development and event production for the past 25 years in various different groups and street festivals and theater festivals and the United Nations. And I've freelanced with technology companies, including Google and video game companies and things like that for particular projects. And I'm excited to be here, and I hope to be able to share some of the things that I have found useful in my work and in my life with you guys.
Thanks, Tati. I want to turn to Robin Kravitz, who is at the Washington Ethical Society now.
Hey everybody, I'm Robin. Like Casey said, I'm at the Washington Ethical Society here in Washington, D.C. I am on staff there, so my job as our communications director is to basically, I run all of our social media, I run our website, I do all of our marketing. If it's something about letting our folks know what we're doing, I oversee it, and if it's something about pulling visitors in, I oversee that. I also have social media and marketing experience because I run my own business outside of WES, in which I am solely responsible for, my own prospecting, which requires all of those same skill sets. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Robin. And then last but absolutely not least, I'd like to introduce Louise Jett, who is with my own society, the St. Louis Ethical Society.
Hi, my name is Louise Jett. I'm a lifelong learner and educator and communicator. I work with the Ethical Society of St. Louis, the Westchester Community for Ethical Culture, and the Secular Student Alliance, managing their social media. And I also teach social media marketing and some graphic design and web design courses. And I'm really happy to be here and share my knowledge with you today.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for being here and for taking part in this. I know this is going to be a really informative, really valuable session for our participants. So before I get started asking questions of my intrepid panelists here, I just want to kind of frame what we're hoping to accomplish with this, this workshop. So I know that especially if you don't have a school background in it, marketing, public relations, branding, graphic design, outreach, those can seem like really scary terms. I mean, those are huge areas, and people devote their entire careers to specializing in just subcategories of that. So at the same time, our societies aren't always, are usually fueled largely by volunteer efforts. And sometimes those volunteers don't necessarily have that professional background, nor do they necessarily have 40 hours a week to devote to social media and marketing outreach as their full-time job, either learning about it or engaging in it. So how do you work smarter and not harder at leveraging the limited resources that your society has to really be effective at reaching your broader community, at reaching your members, at engaging with them, at letting people know know what you stand for, what's going on with you, at being able to respond to them. And how do you do that in a way that looks professional enough to engage the trust of that community, of those stakeholders that you're hoping to reach? And that's kind of what we're hoping to share with you tonight by sharing some of these best practices, some really great tools that are online that allow people who don't have a background in, say, graphic design or social media posting to still get kind of professional level results, and to allow you to conserve the resources that your society has for things that maybe you can't assign to volunteers or you can't teach yourself how to do. So instead of hiring somebody to necessarily do social media for you on a full-time basis, how do you leverage the resources that are available out there to be able to do it yourself until the point where you grow large enough to be able to have those resources to invest in a professional person? So that's kind of the framework we're taking here. And I want to reinforce that we're kind of viewing this workshop as a high level overview. So there are lots of wonderful tutorials online. We've heard from people even on the communications committee that have expressed their opinions that it's so easy to go to YouTube or to TikTok or to find Weber tutorials to teach yourself how to do things in a manner that engages best with your own learning style. So we're not going to try to give you a tutorial for any particular one of the tools that we mentioned. Instead, we're trying to make you aware of those tools so that you can decide what appeals most to you, what concords best with your own personal skill set, and then give you some resources that can direct your own learning process. I do want to emphasize, though, that the Communications Committee at the AEU is always here to support you, to answer any questions that you have, and to provide resources that you would find useful when it comes to using and leveraging these tools. And at the end of this workshop, I'm going to put a link to in the chat to a resource guide that we've come up with that has links to many of the tools that we're going to be discussing tonight, and maybe some additional ones that we won't have a time to cover, but that you might find useful in your own work. So with that said, I want to kind of spend the next half hour or so asking some general questions of our panelists. And the first question that I have is that when you start to wade into blog posts or literature on social media in particular, but general outreach in general, you hear two terms. You hear reach and you hear engagement. And those two terms can sound kind of scary and kind of mystifying, especially if you are not a social media or a communications professional. So I'm wondering if our panelists would care to talk a little bit about how they define those terms, what they think is worthy of prioritizing at different stages in your journey towards developing your communication strategy, and how you can, what kind of metrics you can look at to really kind of track those two types of ideas. So I'm going to open it up, and whoever would like to jump in there first, go ahead.
Sure. I'll wait in a little bit first. I'll go with some definitions and then definitely hear from the expertise of my esteemed panelists. I would define reach and engagement. First, reach would be the general who clicks on a certain post. So usually you would see that number larger than engagement. It's anyone who comes across it, views, and then reach is a specific engagement rather, is a specific interaction they have. So on social media, it would be liking, loving any of those interesting emoticons you see, commenting, sharing. So I would say that engagement kind of falls underneath that reach umbrella. And then metrics that you can use, which I think has been very helpful. At first, I usually just think Google Analytics as a way of being able to track how certain posts would perform. Now you could even do it in-house without spending money to do it. You could use it Facebook, Meta, which handles Facebook and Instagram. You can also see Twitter as well. So those are some useful tools that, taking some exploring, you could definitely get some key data without having too much of a background, with someone kind of wading in and learning on the go. You're able to see exactly how many people you reach, how many people you engage with, and getting specific data points on that, which I've found very helpful.
about Louise? I know that you do some teaching in social media, and you work very uh, a lot in social media. And what are your thoughts on reach versus engagement? And should people who are just starting out, should they prioritize one over the other, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what we're talking about is analytics, and each social media site has a built-in analytics tool that will tell you how many people you reach, how many people are engaging or interacting with your posts, how many followers and likes that you've gained, throughout the month. I think it's good to take a long-term, big picture approach to these things. So if you start your Facebook page and you're like, I'm going to have 10,000 likes in 2 months, that's not realistic. Like, it could take you a year to get there. It could take you 3 years to get there, right? But you want good quality growth, and that comes slowly. So to me, I think engagement is more important than reach, but you got to have the reach to get the engagement, right? Because engagement is that one other step of them actually socially endorsing your post. And that's what's really important. So people don't trust the Ethical Society of St. Louis. They don't trust the American Ethical Union, not anymore. People do not trust institutions like they used to. They trust other people. So when we put content out there on social media and it is socially endorsed by human beings that they know and they trust, that is when they start to trust our institutions. So, and data is really important, but I could do a lot of unethical things on my social media accounts and get those numbers to just skyrocket, and like negative content or even fake and false news, right? It gets a lot of engagement and a lot of interaction, but we can't just focus on those numbers because we don't want that kind of like junky growth. We want good quality growth, people who might actually consider visiting our societies. And then that's what I want to encourage you. One of our main goals is to get people to visit our societies, to physically come to our campuses or virtually visit our Zoom events so they can feel like a part of our community, be impressed by our beautiful buildings and our wonderful members, and connect with us, right? Because that's really, social media is less about technology than it is psychology, right? We're just using a new tool to communicate the same values and ideas that we have for a really long time. So yes, numbers are important. I think especially when you're starting out, your reach and your growth, because you don't want to be creating all this wonderful content that nobody sees. And where that starts is with your own members. So getting them involved, teaching them how to be super fans. So a super fan is someone who shares your content online and offline, face to face, and is just kind of like a cheerleader for your ethical society. And those are the kinds of people that bring new members, or at least curiosity around your society and your events. So don't forget, there's real people in those numbers, and don't get too fixated on them either, because what's really important is the quality of the interactions that you're having online.
I think, oh,
Sorry. I just wanted to add, I agree with Louise completely, and thank you, Jake, for such a good explanation of what the difference is. But one thing that I find that is really enlightening to me is the repeat visitors, which is something you can also find on analytics, because I think they're really the valuable people that to keep in mind and to try to engage in person when they do come to one of your events. From my experience, whenever I see, in the analytics that somebody has come more than a couple of times, those are the people that I try to reach out to in person and talk to, and ask them if they have any questions about who we are and all that, because they're obviously interested enough that they came more than once. And so those are, to me, the little precious gems that you can get from analytics, is finding out who's always RSVPing to your Eventbrite, who's, because, they are the future members, I think.
that's
The other
excellent.
thing I'll add, sorry, Casey, if you want me to stop talking.
I was just going to prompt you. So I had a question for you. But please go ahead and I'll ask my question if you don't.
I think there's one other word I would add that I think in this conversation is important, and that's organic reach. So when you see the word organic, what that means is we're not paying for those people to come look at our page. And so I think tracking organic reach and encouraging organic reach, however that over time you can develop patterns and figure out what your community does and how they interact, that you can build that organic reach number, because that's in a sense free marketing. So the more you can get without paying money, right? Like that's like, just a win-win. And so I also tend to add that one kind of in as like a footnote number to track as well.
Thank you all for that. So the question I was going to ask you, Robin, because I know you're going to be touching on this a little bit more later in our presentation, but please feel free to jump in, Jake, Tati, and Louise, if you have ideas about this too, is what are some ways to organically grow your reach? And if you need to grow it through some paid advertising as well, is that a no-go? Do you want to avoid that at all costs? No pun intended. Or or is it okay to engage in that? How do you make those two strategies complement each other? And then another question I had related to reach's engagement is, once you get that engagement, do you guys have any best practices for maintaining the engagement, for keeping the momentum going, or for managing responses? Are there best practices regarding responding to people who you are engaging, say, for example, by posting comments on your Facebook page?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I think, with the lens we have tonight of, we're going to assume we want to make this the most economical way to be on social media, and economical not only in money but also in like labor time. There are tools within social media, specifically like Meta, which is going to run your Facebook and Instagram, that you can set up to give auto responses. So I'm getting messages that my volume is really low. Can you all hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Sue and Scott, I know, put a message in the chat. Is that any better for you? Has that improved at all, Sue?
So I'll keep talking, and maybe
Yeah.
hopefully the recording will capture it.
Yeah.
I'm not very often told I'm quiet. So looking at using those built-in tools and really diving in on what do they already give you for free. Things like you can embed Facebook chat on your website and then set up an auto reply. So that way you don't need to have somebody on Facebook every moment of every day or somebody on your website every day. And instead you can use these tools that give the user kind of like satisfaction, like they feel heard in the moment. And that way they kind of feel engaged. But you also, as a volunteer or maybe a staff person with minimal hours, can kind of judge your time and chunk as it makes sense for you. So I think that's kind of like the first dive into it. Sorry, Casey, there was a second question.
Oh, and this is kind of for all of the panel.
Yeah.
When it comes to increasing reach specifically, and I think that,
right.
You've all touched on how engagement is really, that's your meat and potatoes, but you need to have sufficient reach in order to really start growing that. How do you grow your reach? I mean, are there certain things that you can do, or certain things that if you do them, they'll really get in the way of you growing that reach organically? And then how does paid reach fit into all of that?
Robin, sorry, were you going to say something? Well, I'll speak more toward organic. I haven't really talked much about my professional history as much, but it's been mainly A, nonprofit, and B, in organic marketing. So I would talk about increasing reach. One thing that I found that'd be helpful is either tagging, connecting it with other like-minded organizations, community partners, anyone with a public essentially profile. I think something that's really stuck in my head already that Louise said is, people don't listen as much to organizations, they listen to people. And taking that step further, one thing that I found to be really, for a consumer and someone in marketing that kind of pays more attention to it, is organizations that personify themselves are ones that I take more seriously than just organizations that sound corporate. So being able, ones that sound more engaging, the ones that sound like people do because people are running them. So one thing that has been helpful with me is, recently we did post for LGBTQ month, and I did a post about Harvey Milk, and I was looking for social media for maybe an organization that a foundation on his behalf, or someone that runs a pretty prominent post, and there was a Harvey Milk Foundation. So instead of just writing Harvey Milk, I had his name, but I tagged the organization, and they not only liked my post and shared it on some platforms, but they actually commented, "Thank you for doing this." And I try to do that with as many other people during a certain theme, whether it's Black History, Women's History Month, and finding like-minded organizations. We did something with the Society of the Triangle. They worked with a criminal justice organization. I tagged them, and then they responded. So being able to kind of do that back and forth of promoting each other, because we're both working to help promote things that we're a part of. So that kind of partnership approach, I think, has been very helpful to reach, and especially kind of taking it almost a step more intimate, where it's organizations that people may know better than you, and then they feel like they can trust you more because you work with you are now associating with people that they trust.
Yeah, I have go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Luis.
I was just gonna say I have a whole lesson on how Weird Al won the internet, and he did 8 days of videos, and he went to his studio, and the studio was like, "We're not gonna make these videos for you; they're too expensive." So he partnered with Funny or Die and Yahoo and Wall Street Journal and all these other places. And he reached all these new College Humor. He reached all these new audiences. They produced his videos, they published them on their social media sites, and his comedy album was #1, which hadn't happened, I think, ever. So it's that powerful, Jake, speaking to those powerful connections where you can kind of reach other people's audiences, and they can reach yours too, right? So it's a win-win. So those are really important relationships to build.
One other thing that I wanted to share as well is I think Facebook groups tend to be undervalued. One of the things that I always do with platforms, is to find groups that relate to the topics that platform is about. And we have very diverse topics. It's very hard to market it for a consistent audience, because one day we're talking about LGBTQ issues, the other day we're talking about housing security, and the other day we're talking about like the history of ethical culture. So it's kind of, they're always one-offs. I feel we're trying to get themes going, like, so that we can expand our reach for certain things. But I always reach out to groups and try to create relationship to groups that have large numbers of people and that share a mission, so that I know that if I create a relationship with the admin of those groups, or if I ask the admin if it's okay to share our information there, which is always ask people. Because otherwise you're spamming the group, right? But if you have the go-ahead from the admin to share that information, it has been a great resource for getting people to some of our stuff, and to getting new people to find out who we are and what we stand for. The follow-up to that is, again, something that I think we need to work on, and making sure that we can consistently reach the same people, which there are certain tools for that. But groups have been one of the greatest resources for us as far as getting new people in our platform.
So we haven't totally touched on like paid social media, which I kind of find that there's like a sweet spot for it. You have to have a very specific goal, and it typically has to be finite and time sensitive. So you have to think like SMART goal strategies. I personally, like at Wes, I don't use any paid social media. The only time I have ever, in a sense, I would say considered paid social media is occasionally I will run competitions among our membership. And I will say, like, for the next 2 weeks, for every like or share of our post, you get an entry into a raffle for a Starbucks gift card for $20. And I get way better numbers because I'm basing it off the relationship. I'm not basing it off Facebook or Instagram or Twitter's algorithm. I'm taking that initial, like, even just if it's $20, people are like, oh, suddenly they tap into what we're doing and will share it, and that will grow. And it's much better worth of my time and my money than giving Facebook $20. I just don't, I don't see an instance except for maybe say if you have paid for a big speaker to come in that maybe has a huge following, like you need to have something like that, but a general paid, hey, we exist isn't going to capture anybody. They're just going to keep scrolling. So I would be really slow before I jumped on the paid advertising bandwagon.
Excellent.
I
Thank you so
agree.
much.
I agree. At Lewis and Clark Community College, where I was a media specialist for 8 years before becoming a full-time faculty member, we started a brand ambassador program. So we had people apply to be super fans, and we'd meet once a month and train them on a different social media site. And we bought them like fancy shirts with their names on them. Like we were investing in people. So when you can invest directly in people, and then they're sharing our content, and we actually revised our social media policy based on our brand ambassadors' feedback. They became a part of the process. We had ice cream social at the end. We did it for 3 years, and it was really a great success, right? So I would rather, put the resources into people than to paid advertising. But Robin made a good point. Unless we have a big speaker, that's what we will advertise. That's what we'll pay at the Ethical Society of St. Louis. If we have a big outside speaker who is prominent and we want to tap into their audience, we will boost an event. But other than that, we really don't do anything.
So I want to ask a couple of follow-up questions about several of the things that we've talked about, because I love the theme that's coming out here in terms of investing in people, investing in relationships. And to me, that ties in a little bit with this engagement with other organizations, which we talked about when we talked about growing your reach. And engagement with others is really a kind of investment in and of itself. It's an investment of time. And it also is an act of community building and collaboration and cooperation, with the idea that you cooperate with them, and then maybe they'll also cooperate with you. And again, that's an investment in time. So I'm wondering if you guys could speak a little bit to other methods that you use, or the importance that you place on that kind of collaborative process and community building. And then I'm going to throw another question in there, and I'm sorry if this confuses things, but we've had a couple of questions in the chat that I think are kind of timely for this point in the discussion, because we've been talking about social media, and there are so many different social media platforms out there. And one of the things that I learned when I was trying to invest my finite resources and how to advertise my businesses was, how do you choose what platform that you're going to post on? I mean, do you try to cover all of them kind of well, or do you focus on one or two and do it really well? And if you are focusing on one or two, I'd be particularly interested, and I think our participants would too, if there's any commonalities between what media platforms you guys have found are especially good for connecting with ethical culture potential members, existing members. What channels are those people already hanging out with? And I know that might vary according to what society you're with in your particular community, but I imagine there might be some commonalities as well.
I mean, we use a very large variety of social media, but we use them for particular purposes. So, for example, our gamers group uses Meetup because Meetup seems to be the one where they all gather, and they get 200 people playing games every time that they have a Friday game night. But that was a very particular purpose for that usage. We have our own Meetup, and we don't do as well on Meetup for our own events. So I think a lot of it is, yes, we invest mostly on a couple of them, Facebook being one of them, and Instagram, and I use Nextdoor a lot. And the reason I use Nextdoor, I don't know if people have heard of it, but Nextdoor is a website that allows you to tap into neighborhoods in particular. So especially when we're doing live events, Nextdoor is what I hit, because I know that it will get me the people in the neighborhood. And it's my neighbors, and it's the society's neighbors. So it's a much easier way for me to do it than to go on Facebook, and I can get anybody in the world. So some of that is, as I'm saying, for us is specific to what we're doing. There's some consistency with making sure that we're consistently posting on Facebook and Instagram and all that, but we focus on the ones that have shown from analytics or from people showing up that they work for our particular purposes.
I can say for us down here in DC, I don't try to be a jack of all trades. I just find that it gets too watered down for the amount of staff timing our society can afford. And so what I tend to do is I heavily focus on Facebook, because it has the aspect of public and private in the same thing. So with minimal work, I'm able to both dual our public page and our members only private group. So that decision is much more about my time and efficiency than necessarily what is in theory best practices, because that's a balance, right? Like so much of social media is actually, or I should say, I'm a big believer that any social media platform can be extremely successful if you are consistent. It is the consistency that matters. And so if you find your folks are on Meetup, then be consistent on Meetup. I have kind of pushed our folks to Facebook because of just time constraints. I do like dual over and copy onto Instagram, but Instagram is an afterthought of what's on our Facebook page, and Twitter gets copies of what goes onto Facebook. So I just, for time efficiency, really curate, I would say probably 90% of social media for Facebook. Now, again, had I more staffing, had I have a larger team, I would love it to be differently. But it's about, I find the more success comes when I'm consistent, the daily posting, the constant engagement. So we have kind of, I have like turned our volume down on other things to really focus in on the Facebook presence.
I love that Robin brought up consistency, because I tell my students, no matter what business, consistency is so very important. If I come to your restaurant and I get an awesome sandwich and then the next time it's half as good, well, now I don't like your restaurant anymore. Where if you would have just gave me the half as good sandwich the first place, I wouldn't know what I'm missing. So you just be consistent, right? You set up expectations and you don't want to fall short of the expectations that you set up. And then for the Ethical Society of St. Louis and for Westchester, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I think those are the big three. I would love the Secular Student Alliance is on TikTok. Of course, we have a much younger demographic, and I would love to explore that. But for time constraint, I just don't think, when we invested in Instagram, we were like, oh man, is this even worth our time? But now we have close to 2,000 followers and our engagement is really up on that platform. And so, yeah, I do think it is worth our time. But what I tell my students is, if you don't have time for it, don't do it. I would rather search for you on Facebook and not find you than find an account that you posted 5 years ago, because then I think you're out of business. Where if I just don't find an account, I'm like, oh, they're not on Facebook. So make sure it's manageable, do what you can. And if you don't have time for it, don't have an account. Don't be in that space if you can't be in the space.
Yeah, I would say, to just echo, I agree. Consistency is always key. Also, both Luis and what Robin's saying, I'm also kind of a big proponent of the big three, using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also, like Robin, I would say I focus more on Facebook. I feel like that's more where demographic of our followers of the AEU fans are more likely in that sphere in Facebook. And I've found more success on Facebook and posting, and then kind of in tandem, Facebook and Instagram have, I guess the one difference is more hashtag. Hashtags are bigger on Instagram, but I would say I use the same content there, and then Twitter more concise. But I would say Facebook, and Facebook even uses hashtags, which I've been trying to branch out in. But I would say Facebook has been a very successful place. But then again, there's no kind of cookie cutter format for social media. It's all about know thy base, know what works well. I saw that Stan Horowitz posted about TikTok. We haven't gone through that avenue yet, but I feel like it's all about what your constituents use the most. Luis mentioned with Secular Student Coalition using TikTok, younger constituency. I think it's all about kind of knowing your base, knowing what people use the best, and really going there. Just because we use Facebook doesn't mean you should. It's all about kind of what what your society uses the best, and then really appealing to them, and then the content and the topics will flow from there.
I want to follow that up and kind of bring this. I love this conversation. I love that you guys brought up consistency of posting, because that was one of our kind of major rules of thumb that we definitely wanted to hammer home with this workshop. And Robin, I want you to mention really briefly that resource that you put together that we're including a link to in the. Sorry, I muted myself halfway through that. But Robin, talk about your resource.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to maybe share my screen? Would that make sense, or would that be, you think, not helpful?
Why don't you go ahead and share it briefly? There's
Okay.
a couple of more things that I want to get to
Yeah,
real quick.
we'll go through this just so I
yeah.
can talk about it real quick.
Perfect,
So I'm going to
perfect.
share this so you guys can see. So this is what you're getting. It's a very basic template you can copy and paste from. But basically, I say if you're going to care about analytics, get yourself 30 days of data before you even open your numbers. Just, it doesn't matter. Do 30 days in a row of posting something every day and try to make it the same time. So this is the schedule I follow at the Washington Ethical Society. So every Monday I post like a meditation or something breathing, and I use a little GIF and I put in the link to it. I put in like Tuesdays are usually either social justice or who we're sharing our offering with, something like that. Every Wednesday, I try to give an interactive question. We get a lot of interactions on Sundays, so I tried to split the difference and go with something interactive, a question, open-ended, tag a friend kind of things on Wednesdays. Thursdays, I highlight Sundays. Fridays, I highlight our Sunday school. Saturdays, I always try to post pictures of our own people, with the goal being encouraging folks to show up on Sundays because they've just seen their friends in a post. And then on Sundays, I'm posting, hey, here's what's happening today. And then literally I have check boxes when I schedule it, and then I know it's done. So this is kind of, I just made a really easy kind of template for everybody to see kind of like the nitty gritty of how I make it happen.
That's super awesome. And just to reiterate for people, there's a link to that where you'll be able to go in and find that document and adapt it for your own use. But Robin, I did want to ask a little bit, because you schedule a lot of your posts in advance, right? So you're not taking time every day to come up with each of these posts individually. You're sometimes scheduling 30 days out and using a scheduling tool so that this is all automated for you, right?
Exactly. Which is also why I selfishly/efficiently prefer Facebook and Instagram. So within the Facebook pages setting, so when you're logged into Facebook as your page, there's like a tab on the left side that I believe it currently says like Meta Business Center, although Facebook changes the name, I feel like, every week. It's basically where you go to see all of your numbers, the post individual, and kind of see those numbers individually on how those did. But there's a scheduling option. So it's called the planner, and you can go in and see up to like, I think it's 90 days in advance. And you can schedule a post every day. So what I typically do is I sit down on like the 30th or the 31st of every month, and I schedule a post that goes out at 10 a.m. every day on Facebook and Instagram on our page. And I do it for a whole month, and I kind of follow that schedule. And that's my bare minimum. So if I get COVID and can't come to work, consistency will maintain. If it's a slow day and we actually don't have anything to really say or share, we still have consistency. If it's a big day that we have stuff to share, cool, that day just becomes more active, but I know I've checked that minimum consistency box. So that way all 30 days of the month I'm getting some content. And then I think one of the cool things about social media is that people forget what you said. So like I have kind of like 60 days of content and I reuse them. And nobody seems to be bothered by that. So like the breathing meditations that I post on like Mindfulness Monday, like every 8 weeks, they just repeat. Like I'm not reinventing the wheel. So once you kind of sit down and figure out what is the voice of our society, You can kind of build yourself a packet, and then it's a matter of just a volunteer going in and copy and pasting the packet that you've created. So you kind of take the labor and like weight of content creation, and it's just content posting.
Thanks, Robin. So I want to turn to another thing that's kind of related to consistency. And we're going to try to go through this relatively briefly because this is kind of like next level marketing and PR. But I do want to talk a little bit about consistency in branding as well. So when you are posting this content to your followers and getting that content out there, it's also important to be consistent in how it looks to them. What is the voice of, whoever is talking in your messages, and what kind of imagery is used, and even down to what colors and fonts you're using. And like I said, this is kind of next level. So it's not necessarily, probably growing your reach, growing your engagement is the most important thing. But that additional branding consistency can add a lot in terms of making your organization look professional, no matter how large or small you are. And so I did want to maybe touch on that a little bit. And I know, Louise, you actually put a link to an example of a brand guidelines document that's real short and sweet from the Ethical Society of St. Louis. So maybe you could really kind of touch on this first, and then we could have the rest of our panelists briefly talk about some of their insights into branding and how you can make that work for your volunteers.
Yeah, I hope you can see the PDF here. It's our Ethical Society brand guidelines. And I really love this document. The document was developed right before I came to work at the Ethical Society, so I didn't help put it together. But as a new employee, I was just so excited to know, like, here's our colors, here's our fonts, here's our messaging. And one of the things that I think is most important are these like key messages and brand values, the brand personality and the messaging. Like, be really thoughtful. Like, we like to laugh, but not at others. So I don't ridicule other religions or, poke fun in a way that would be offensive, right? But we can laugh at stuff that's funny. We can laugh at the human condition. I mean, we could still have a sense of humor, right? So just kind of laying out that, being accepting of all people, but not all behaviors. So, trying to call people in, and when they do harm, call people out, and being just that ethical presence on social media, which I think that we need. And then, of course, all that other important stuff like our logo, our tagline, like I said, our colors, kind of some guidelines on how to run our logo. And this is just a nice document to have, especially if you have a lot of committees who are working on different things. And it's just a nice guiding document. And I did include a link to it in the resources. So feel free to just take it and make it your own.
Thanks so much, Louise. Any other thoughts from the rest of you about branding? Again, I know this is something that, it's kind of requires some additional resources or thought, but there are some pretty cool tools we're going to be talking about in the next section that can really help with this. And so, especially when it comes to graphic design.
I think when it comes to branding, it feels like a mountain. Like, it can feel really overwhelming to create that document, and like, we have nothing. How do we get there? But I think it's important to reframe branding and think of it as a way to make your social media team more accessible to a larger volunteer corps. Again, you're not asking somebody to come in and volunteer and create all of this stuff. It's, here's your font, here's your font size, here's your color. Okay, now you have this week. Now go to our posting guide and copy and paste. You're making it so that you can have a wider range of people with lower tech skills, kind of, and you can create a larger volunteer corps. And it, I think, also makes it feel less overwhelming to join your social media team.
Jake or Tati, did you want to say anything about that topic?
Yeah, I would say whether it can feel next level, I feel like it's pretty kind of hand in hand when it comes with reach and engagement. One thing that stuck with me, graduate with more of a writing background, is I noticed whether it's from authors to even like educational textbooks, everything has its own voice. So you have your own reflection of your of your individual organizational values in what you write. And almost like with your own personality or fashion sense, I feel like branding is almost that same way of just getting across who you are. And one thing that I remember at my very first internship, so I would have been leaping head over heels for something like Luis just posted, like exact branding document. Like that made my marketing nerd. I'm just get really happy and giddy because that's the stuff that just makes it easy. Because initially, when I looked at my first internship, I was looking, okay, what words do they use? What's their style? What's their vibe? What do they like to say word wise? So then I could really almost jump in that double dutch of branding. So then I can continue the same language and keep maintain the trust of the people that are already reading the content that I'm writing. So I think it's being able to kind of find that. So then you can just almost adapt that personality of your society, and people know who you are, they trust that, and being able to kind of jump in, as Robin was saying, where you're not asking volunteers to reinvent the wheel, you're giving them guidelines and then just saying, I trust your judgment, follow these guidelines, and then do what you think is best.
I will say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All I would say, in college, I remember this really great analogy when it came to branding was, if you were dropped in a foreign country and didn't speak the language, how would you find a McDonald's? It's based upon branding, right? The golden arches, they have a specific font. And there's safety in recognizing, I mean, you may not love McDonald's, but if you're starving and don't know what is safe to eat, right? They feel like safety. So your branding creates a feeling of safety and trust of what you're putting out onto the internet, which I feel like in the last, since 2016 maybe, has felt a little unsafe. And so you can create sort of like a home feel with your branding and create a sense of safety. So I definitely recommend, if there's interest in doing it in your society, I think it's definitely worth the time and attention.
One of the things that I am an employee of the Brooklyn Society, so I tend to do the brunt of keeping sort of brand recognition. But there's also the reality of when you have a lot of committees that people will generate materials that have nothing to do with what your branding looks like. I've seen logos that I didn't even know existed, and fonts that woohoo. So, um, so one of the things that I found helpful was to ask people to just pass the material through me. So like having one or two people who have the technical know-how, because sometimes it's a matter of just knowing how to maneuver those images and all those things. It's, having one or two people who sort of reliably can help people produce those documents, or reliably produce, like I have a blank sheet basically with our logo on top. It's like, if you're sending this to any other organization, use this, just for, and it's not even our official, or official, what is it called, letterhead, but it's just something that has a recognition there, that if people are just sending a letter or communicating with another organization, that people know this is coming from the society. And I often end up getting sort of materials that people send via email and just putting them into that format and sending it back. So like just having one or two people who sort of like can maneuver enough pieces of them to just keep at least a look of the organization in place is very important, because
Yeah,
it's very hard when you have a lot of committees. It's really hard to do that efficiently.
and it's so important for like you to have your eagle eye on it, because I don't see my typos. And I was just going to say, like one time at Lewis and Clark, the student activities department ordered all these water bottles and they said student activites because nobody proofread them. And we're in media services, we're like, oh, why didn't you send that to us? Like it would have took us 5 minutes and we would have caught that.
Yeah. One thing I'd add on that, which reminds me of a poster ingrained in my memory from my alma mater, Ithaca College, the writing department. It had two examples. It said, "Let's eat kids" and "Let's eat kids," and right underneath it says "Grammar matters." And one thing I've spoken to with Bart, and I know everyone, marketing or not, can relate. you can be the best editor in the world and you will always miss your own stuff. It's just, that's one thing one of my professors said to me, and it's true. So always being able to have, if you have a second set or third set of eyes, volunteers, other coworkers, colleagues, definitely use them. If not, take a step back, because you're going to miss there, and them every time. Because I definitely do, and it's very easy to do. So being able to kind of, because you're going to run into those issues, as Louise said, like it happens to the best of us. But being able to kind of put kind of precautionary measures in place to prevent that, self-editing or working together, it's definitely a lifesaver.
Yeah, I will definitely second and third that sentiment. I'm sure everybody on this panel and probably everybody in attendance has had one of those experiences. And I will add another, just a quick tip and trick, because I've done a lot of writing in my various careers. And for catching typos, sometimes if you print something and then read it on a page, I do hate wasting the paper, but any way that you can make yourself see it in a different context can be helpful if you can't get that second pair of eyes. Although a second pair of eyes is definitely always helpful if you can manage it. So
I will, before we jump through that,
Yeah.
Casey, I do want to just kind of, and I'm sorry, I didn't bring this up when we did our meeting, so I'm kind of splurging this on everybody, is the idea also of perfectionism and white supremacy, right? Like there is a balance between appropriate grammar and what you're trying to say and wordsmithing and white supremacy, like to death of what we're saying. Like, and a like wordy post or something that maybe isn't perfect is better than nothing. I mean, we don't want to be offensive, but also you also don't want perfection to like get in the way of good. And recognizing that, I think looking around this room, it's a very white space, and grammar is a system of power that white people have historically used to hold other people back. So I think, I know that's super heavy and not while we're here, but I think it's important to own that in this conversation as well.
Thanks for bringing that up, Robin, because I think that is something that it's very easy for us to overlook. And yeah, to always be mindful, and that could be a whole another panel. So I kind of wish we could do something like that too, about how linguistic structures serve to create groups and exclude people from those groups is a really interesting topic. So I do think that's really as ethical humanists, that is something that it's important for us to never lose our awareness of. So thank you. And from that heavy note, I do want to transition us to something a little bit more fast-paced and kind of fun. So what I was hoping we could do as a panel is go through and each of us kind of name one of your favorite tools. So I know that that marketing and communications is very multifaceted, that you probably have many, many favorite tools. And I hope that we have included all of those and more on our resources packet that I'll be posting in the chat in just a moment. And then again, at the end of this session. But if you could single out just one that you think has made the biggest difference for you, or if you're a professional, but you're keeping in mind our audience may include people who are not professionals, one that you think would make the biggest difference for them in terms of ease of use and increasing the quality of what comes out of that tool. And I'm going to ask you to just name one tool real quick. And if you want to share your screen, don't give a tutorial, but just let people know where to find it and a quick brief précis of what it can do. And if we have time after that, we can maybe do another round. But I guess we're going to do this popcorn style. So I'm going to call on one of you. I'm going to give my favorite first, just so I get called on too, but because we haven't mentioned PR that much yet. But then I'll call on another one of you, and then that person, when you're done, call on another panelist who hasn't gone yet. Okay, and we'll go through that way. So I do want to mention to everybody, because we've been talking a lot about like online resources today, like social media, but PR and communications also extends into traditional media. So things like getting interviewed by a newspaper, even if that newspaper happens to be read by people online, that's a really great way to, again, engage with other trusted organizations, trusted sources, so that you can leverage the trust that people have in them to get interest in your society. And my favorite place to go for this is called HARO, which is short. It's an acronym for Help a Reporter Out. So I'm going to share my screen real briefly and show you where you can go for this. What HARO is a website resource and list for both journalists and people who want to be interviewed by journalists. And so it's a really grassroots effort that you can have volunteers. You don't need to be a media professional to do this. But when you go to their website, which is called Help a Reporter, you'll click under sources. Journalists sign up for this too. And what journalists can do is post queries. They're looking for expert commentary on certain questions about things that they are going to publish in the near future. So if you sign up for the sources, I'm going to go to the how it works here. You can register with HARO, go through a list of different things that you are qualified to talk about as a source. And then 3 times a day, they will send you a digest. I'm showing you a screenshot of my email for one of my businesses where I had signed up for HARO. They'll send you a digest that lists all of the queries that have come in recently about the different topics that you feel like you are qualified to talk about. And after they list those, they'll go into a little bit more detail about the specific queries that the journalists have. So what particular questions might you be qualified to answer? And through this email, you can sign up, you can send a response directly to the journalist. So I know that this, I mean, three digests a day sounds like a lot, but it's pretty quick to scroll through them. And when I was managing the particular business where I was using HARO, I was featured in publications like Better Homes and Gardens and Martha Stewart Living, directly because of answering queries that I got through HARO. So if you're interested in having representatives of your society be featured in major national and local media, HARO is a really great resource to check out, and it's all free. So journalists pay to use it, but if you're registering as a source, it's all free to you. And you can start to really build up a relationship so that you become a trusted source with journalists and they come to you first. So definitely one of my favorite PR resources. So thanks for letting me do my little spiel there. And I am gonna call on Tati.
So my resource, I don't know if favorite is the word that I would call, but the one that I think encompasses a lot of different tools. And that is the Google Nonprofit. And one of the reasons I like this is there's something about branding and being able to sort of like maintain the integrity of the data in your society. You can, when you sign up for Google Nonprofit, you're given a workspace where you can have your domain name, email addresses, you can retrieve information from other domain name. Let's say somebody doesn't work for your company anymore, you can retrieve all of those materials back into your workspace. I have about 6 email addresses. They're at bsec.org email addresses, and ironically one that people use the most that is not. But I try to consistently, our board members have at bsec.org emails for communications in a shared Google Drive and shared use space. But besides that usability, there are other things that they provide. They have a huge amount of training and resources for nonprofit organizations. And they also, once you sign up for Google Nonprofit, you're eligible for the Google grants. And one of their advertisement grants is $10,000 for free of advertisement every month. So that's $120,000 of free advertisement that you can get just for applying for the Google grant. Another thing that I found, and I'm sort of like took a screenshot to just for you guys to see, that I found that was really useful from using some of the Google Nonprofit products is I've become much more consistent about using the Google Maps as a resource for people to find us. And one of the things that I found, like if you look here and it says 42,330 views this month, right? So once I claimed that and you can claim your profile. Once I claim that profile, the amount of questions that people have asked me through the Google Maps and through all of those tools of we're also starting a campaign on our YouTube, which is also going through the Google nonprofit, which has to do, oh, actually I had it here and I forgot to show that, which was the YouTube social impact, which allows you to post things that have to do with your organization and to use it for fundraising and use it for brand awareness. And they also have, like, as I'm saying, there's a huge list of resources of tools that you can use within your organization that also help you with grant writing and with fundraising and with reaching out to different communities and working with other organizations. So I highly suggest people visit it. And I'm going to stop here. So.
And pick someone else to go, Tati.
Robin?
Okay, so thank you. I am gonna highlight that Facebook Meta Business Suite. I know I kind of already-ish talked about it, so I don't know if this is cheating or not. I hope not. So I'm going to show you all if you can see this. So here's kind of as an admin of our society page. And when I go over here to the Meta Business Suite and I click that, it kind of takes me, I thought I preloaded it to make it easier on us. Okay, here we go. Let's go to this month. There we go. So you can kind of see, it gives you this month view. And I have gone in and scheduled posts all month long. So like these are already going to populate next week. So you can see it on the month view. If you want to kind of get a feel of like the images you have scheduled, you can view it that way, and kind of see all that stuff, and kind of play with it that way. I just create, and it's really, like I said, it's a copy and paste kind of situation, as if you were just posting, and then you publish and schedule. So I think it's almost scary easy. So I will say, Luis, you want to go?
Okay, let me get I'm going to talk about Canva because I'm a Canva super fan. Let me just share the Canva. There we go. So Canva has a desktop and online version. This is the online version. Canva is a free graphic design software with paid option. And if you're a teacher, you can actually get Canva for Education for free, which is awesome because then I can share it with my students and they get it for free too. So this is the Canva interface. It's just amazing. You can make literally anything here. I clicked on this More tab because these are all of the templates. You can make videos. You can make a website. It is so easy. So you can see some of the templates they have here, infographics, photo collages, and then all your templates live. This is actually my education account, so you'll see some portfolios that students made and shared with me. I do have 2 accounts, so I do pay for the one that I use for social media marketing, and then I have my free education account, and I put all my students on it. Otherwise, I would feel bad. So this is actually the free version, the education one, but they're not that different. You just get access to more like B-roll video, stock photography, and graphics. So you can also create a design. So you could click up here and make a custom size. But I just want to show you how so very easy it is to make a website in Canva. So I just searched website to pull up the templates. And then you can see these little, these are pro ones. So subscribers get those free, but here's, you have to pay to get those, but this is a free template. So each page is kind of laid out here and wants to open in my app that I'm showing you online. And then you could just publish it as a website. So I could actually go in here. I can edit the design. I can put in my own pictures. I can upload my own pictures. Here's elements and things that I can add. I can double click. It has a menu up here. I don't want it to be too much of a tutorial, but then when I click publish as a website, and then I want free, I can do this absolutely free. I want to add navigation, click continue. And then I can enter, this is a wizard. Well, just add it, there we go. And then click publish. And it'll open up in another tab. And then you have a website that you can share with people. And it has menu and everything. And you can put animations and come on. I teach web design and I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. But you can also edit videos on Canva, and there's B-roll. Like, there's hardly anything graphical that it can't do. It has music, so copyright-free music. It's just amazing. If you ever get in there digging and get lost, let me know. I'd love to help you. Another one of my favorite tools on Canva is the background remover tool. So if you have a logo that has a white background, you want to remove it and have it be transparent, Canva will do that for you too. It's just amazing.
Jake, I think you're last, but you're not least. Yes, you're up.
Thank you. Okay, well, the what I'm going to talk about, I feel like with my nonprofit background, and I feel like it aligns pretty closely with societies, is we're all trying to make bang for your buck. And when it comes to money to spend on marketing, it's a little more few and far between. So you really have to be creative in how you use resources. And when you run into little fun aspects called copyright, it's trying to find the right images to use so you don't get in trouble with government and all those fun entities. So what I want to show is using images that show that you can still be professional without having to spend a lot of money. So first I like to go with, you can go with the stock photo option. So Pexels and Unsplash are two websites that I've used before. As you can see, the images are very clear, concise, and you can use it with a bunch of different posts. Sometimes if you want it to kind of look maybe a little more natural, one thing that luckily can help is we have our own Google Drive of AEU photos that is easily accessible and open to the public. So if you're looking for something that feels a little more real and also more relatable, because people you may know as well, there's a lot of different categories, different images that we make available. And then one that kind of is a blend of the two that I found to be really helpful is Bing Images. So right now I just typed in ethical culture, not to be on the nose or anything with branding. And as you can see here, I can make it a little larger because it's kind of small. There we go. So in order to avoid copyright, because a bunch of these images right now, if you just open even Google Images, it will give you copyright, and you have to find images that you can use for marketing purposes without getting in trouble. So at Bing Images, you go to license, you scroll down to free to use, and then these are all images that you can use that won't get you in trouble. They could be mostly Wikipedia or blog sites, but the images, I would say, have more of a personal aspect than you would find on stock photos, but it's a little more personal, but it's still very good quality. So that's what I've used to find pictures of even autobiographical people that I posted content for various months, or just being able to find other content that I couldn't find at the other sites. So I feel like these have been good ways to be able to look professional while having to break out the piggy bank for iStock or other paid services. And let me exit out.
Thanks so much, Jake. And I've just popped something in the chat, but I think that as ethical culturists, it's also important to note here that we talk about copyright in terms of not wanting to get in trouble, but what copyright is really also about is making sure that artists and other creators are fairly compensated for their work, because the person who made that image is trying to make a living by giving it to you and you using it. And so royalty-free image sites are really great because all of the creators who have posted their work there are basically consenting to let you use it for free. And so it really is a win-win, because you're not ripping somebody off, even if inadvertently, the way you might if you're just using a Google image search, but not ensuring that content is free for you to use. And so I always, really appreciate that part of these free image resources as well, that you've already got something screened and everything is on, everything is above board with it, and they even give you the information for you to be able to credit and send people back to look at the artists who have created the work that you're looking at. So I think for us in particular as an organization, that's definitely a huge plus for using those types of sites. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and I know we've gotten a lot of questions through the chat, and I'm sure people have been raising their hands. I'm going to ask Bart to maybe monitor people raising their hands while I go through some of the questions we've gotten in chat. And if you posted a question, but it was kind of answered through the course of our discussion, I'm gonna, acknowledge it, but maybe kind of devote more time from our panelists to the things that haven't really been addressed yet. The first question that we got was from Jeffrey, and he asked, should we engage some tech-capable seniors to work on the resistant cohort? So I guess that what that really hits at kind of is encouraging our volunteers, encouraging a broader volunteer base, but also a broader base of audience who are willing to kind of engage with our content online. And do you guys have any best practices or pointers for helping ethical society members who maybe aren't engaged on Facebook or not real big fans of Instagram just yet to, kind of be able to engage with you there as well?
Well, I'm not sure if this relates as well, but one thing this reminds me of is ways to be able to help support the causes. Initiatives that I've been working on is kind of making people social media influencers. So ways where members of the society can essentially go interact with various posts from the AEU, other societies, and being able to like, comment, share, and as I think we've even talked about in these planning groups as well, it's obviously things that you feel passionately about, because the more you believe in it, the more that it'll translate when you talk to other people, and you'll feel more passionate as you do it. So I feel like being able to find content or topics that really speak to you and being able to promote it from there, because especially I feel like in this community, it takes people take a lot of stock in what you share and what you believe in, because they know who you are personally. So being able to take the content that you're a fan of, and from there, people that are like-minded or family, friends of yours see, oh, so-and-so shared this, there must be something there, and then it'll kind of have that almost domino effect.
In the communication resources, I include a slideshow to like a super fan training session that I did. So cultivate those super fans, tell people where you're at, why you're on social media, how they can follow you first and see your posts first, empower them. Not everybody's there. That was a forum, and the people who weren't interested in social media, they didn't come to that forum. So, but a lot of people did, and they asked questions. They're curious about how your society is leveraging social media and how they can help. So cultivate those super fans. If you don't have the budget for a brand ambassador program, a forum where people can just come and talk, and you can empower them and teach them how to do it. It goes a long way.
One of the challenges that we had was concerns about privacy. Our society has a lot of folks that work in the government or in more sensitive jobs that they don't have social media. And so what we did is I actually sat down with a bunch of folks, and they had, we made Facebook and Instagram profiles for them, but in their pet's name. So finding ways to think outside the box, what is the barrier to participation, and how can we get outside the standard thinking and solve that barrier and make it go away. So I think there's no rule that says your cat can't be on Instagram and like your society. It counts just as much.
Yeah, and I would second with all the pet animal profiles out there, my dogs included. They definitely have a right to be there as much as anyone.
So we had a couple questions about social media platforms, kind of in the middle of us discussing that. But I just want to, address them. We had a question from Mary Beth Sotis about our top 3 media outlets and whether or not we use LinkedIn, and another from Stan Horowitz about whether or not we use TikTok. We talked a little bit about TikTok. I didn't hear anybody mention LinkedIn, although Facebook was kind of up there in terms of one of the top 3. Do you guys, real briefly, because we only have about 10 minutes left, but any others that we didn't mention that you want to give a shout out to?
We do use LinkedIn, and we have a TikTok account, but it is sadly one of those accounts that we barely use because I started it right before the pandemic, and it's like, so.
I think one of the things when you're thinking about branching out or more, like not Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, is asking if you can do it genuinely. I think if you are trying to get on TikTok, find out who in your congregation is already on TikTok. Don't force it where it's uncomfortable. TikTok is a lot of like extroverted folks. So like think about like who's comfortable doing that, and can we do it real and come across real? I wouldn't force like a square peg in a circle hole kind of thing when it comes to your social media choices.
Thanks.
I was trying
to.
Sorry, I was
Go
trying
ahead.
to remember the name, and maybe one of the other panelists can help. There is a new social media that is specifically targeted at progressive liberals. I know there was another one that sort of went kaput after it was attacked, and there's another one that is brewing, and I signed up for it, and I'm trying to to find it right now, and I can't, which
Thanks.
says I haven't used it much. But does anybody remember what it was? Because I was intrigued by it.
I don't know if this is it, but we have discussed Clubhouse, which is like Clubhouse and Voxer, which are like walkie-talkie, nothing visual. We haven't really gone down those paths just because of staffing limitations.
Yeah. Maybe you could, this resource that we shared with you is a Google document, and all of our panelists have editing access for it. So you should check back on this repeatedly, because it's not impossible that we will continue adding things to it. And maybe Tati, if you when you remember what the name of that one is, you could add it in there as a possibility. A question from Richard Coral, and I'm going to assume by EE that you mean ethical education, but this was in the context of paid advertising for actual society events that have large followers. And you asked advertise for special programs like EE. So again, assuming you mean ethical education, but feel free to jump in if that is not, if I'm misunderstanding you there.
Jump in on that one. So one of the main resources that I have found for you, we used to have an event called Family Celebrate Africa that sold out to the point that we have to keep people out of the building. And a lot of our trial days for Ethics for Children, we have a paid Ethics for Children program. So the marketing for that, I market for that very heavily. The places that we found the most were most efficient were local parent lists, right? So local parent lists, like I run a group on Facebook that's like Park Slope Parents. It has like 8,000 people right now, but finding likewise groups that are like that you can market in. And I know we're a little partial here, Casey, but homeschooler groups, people don't understand how much we align with homeschooler groups. So I'm a homeschooler, and we went from having 12 kids to having 44 kids in a year by marketing to homeschooler groups and local parents lists. We're going to try to make that happen again, now that the pandemic is, that we're going back live in person. But it was a very, very, very good source of advertising for us.
Fantastic. Thank you. Again, just kind of trying to run through these questions quickly. John Dakin asked kind of a pithy question. He said that, do you feel that social media engagement can be an end in itself, as in a means towards society event attendance and eventual membership? Well, I guess those are two different things. And then he asked, or both.
I would say means to an end. I feel like it could definitely be a good tool. I feel like it's always good not to put all your eggs in one basket. I know one thing that we started doing actually, AEU, due to Luis actually, was starting to use Facebook events to promote different events in addition to using Meetup and our website. It's a good way to get kind of a good tally of who's actually coming to your events, good RSVP list. So I feel like it's definitely good to, as Robin says, best not to spread yourself too thin, but good to diversify when you can and using different places, especially with event promotion, because the goal is to get it spread far and wide. So anywhere that you could really use to help raise awareness of an event, especially for free, which Facebook event is, and it can look quite professional and with a kind of a simplistic feel and template to it. I feel like is a useful way to help spread awareness of important events or programs that you're really looking for people to know about.
I think brand awareness is so important. So just being there. So if someone's like, I want to go see that, I want to go visit the Ethical Society of St. Louis, but I'm going to check them out first. I'm going to go to their social media sites. I'm going to go to their webpage, and it legitimizes you. Then people can feel safer coming to your building because they can kind of check you out online and kind of feel you out instead of just showing up, with no other information. So it's important to be present and be there because people are going to look for you. If you're getting the word out, you're going to, create a buzz and curiosity. So you want them to be able to find you online.
And I think just to kind of add on to what Luis just said is being authentic. What you put out there, you want people to know what they're getting. Like when they walk in the door, it should feel like an extension of what they've experienced online. You don't want them to walk in the door and be like, this, like, I'll give you one example real quick. Is so part of my job description is ARAMAC work, so anti-racist multicultural work. So I have intentionality in the figures that I use in pictures. I try not to only use like white hands and white children. And if you Google like happy couple, did you know there were couples who are not all white that are happy in the world? But I also balance, I don't want to tokenize them. And I don't want somebody to walk in and think we are a congregation that is all, people of color. We're not. And so it's a balance of like what I wish we were and comfort when you walk in the door that you don't feel surprised.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned being authentic too. And your online relationships are real relationships. They're just as real as the ones that you have with people face to face. So treat them as such. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, those are such great points, Robin and Louise. Thank you so much, and stated so succinctly and powerfully. Just looking through the rest of these, there were several questions about whether or not certain resources would be available. So I'm going to take this opportunity to drop that link to our resource page back in the chat for those of you who didn't catch it the first time. And we'll also make this available on our webpage. Hopefully we can do that link from the hopefully we could do it from our aeu.org homepage, but definitely I think we can probably link it to the delegates material for this particular presentation as well. So you guys can all get to it outside of this if you haven't copied and pasted the chat into some other document. And then let's see, I think, there was one more question, and I know we're right at 1 minute too. So I'm going to ask that maybe our panelists maybe make this part of our resources page. But there was one question about from Iris Woodard about what other organizations that we link with. So you guys, what other organizations do you find is useful to engage with, to include hashtags with, so to do mentions of some of those community building exercises that we are talking about earlier. And maybe the best way to address that would be to maybe make a list of those in our resources document so that other people can take a look and be inspired, and maybe also link up with some of those. Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay. And then I think that we are right at 8 o'clock, so I don't want to keep anybody longer. Thank you all so much for being with us for this presentation. I hope that you found some nuggets of worth in there, some things that make you excited about publicizing your own society and about spreading the word and engaging with your audience and really creating an even bigger community than we already have there and helping it thrive. So I appreciate you all being here. The AEU Communications Committee is responsible for both spreading the word about the AEU, but also supporting our societies in their attempts to and their efforts towards spreading the word about themselves. So we are endeavoring to continue to create resources for you. And if you ever have any questions, please let us know. And always, we are always interested in input from our members or communications people at our member societies in terms of volunteering for our committee. So please get in touch with us. Jake Ritter is our chair. You can find his email address and contact information on the AEU.org website, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.